Hello and welcome to Ahval Podcasts, the home of objective, up-to-date, independent reporting on Turkey. Don't forget to follow our reports through social media, on ahvalnews.com or through our mobile app. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to Talking Turkey. I'm Ahval editor David Lepeska, and joining me today is Yusuf Erim, political analyst for Turkey's state-run broadcaster TRT World. Hello and welcome, Yusuf. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David.
So the latest news on Syria is that yesterday, Sunday, the U.S. announced the full withdrawal of its troops from the area, which led a few hours later to the Syrian Kurdish militia, the Syrian Democratic Forces, or SDF, reaching a protection deal with President Bashar Assad's government. Assad regime forces have now begun entering formerly Kurdish-held towns near the border. Yusuf, does Turkey see this as a victory? Do Turkish officials believe that this achieves their aim of eradicating an SDF entity, a Kurdish entity along its border?
All right. Well, let's start with the latest developments. Now, as you said, the YPG are trying to reach a deal with Assad. I don't know the status of the deal. While some places are reporting that it's been reached, some places are reporting that it's not confirmed. Now, President Erdogan just spoke about an hour or two ago, and judging from his statements and movements from the Syrian National Army, Turkey's partner in this operation, it looks like the Syrian National Army will be launching an offensive on Manbij and Ain al-Arab, and its other name Kobani, very, very shortly. So that whole expectation that the regime will obtain control of these two cities, I think, is still definitely up in the air. From the Turkish perspective right now, it looks like Turkey will be in Manbij very shortly, and also Ain al-Arab. And these two places are very key for Turkish national security. And obviously that M4 highway, control of the M4 highway, and the continuousness of, if that is a word, the continuousness of continuity of Turkish-backed territory in the north is very important, hence Manbij being a very important plot of real estate in this operation. Now, what Turkey's hoping to do, obviously, is shore up its national security by decimating the YPG, which is a group that Turkey views as an existential national security threat to itself via its partner in Turkey, the PKK, which is a US, EU, and Turkey designated terror group. Now, once this national security is secured and the military aspect of the operation is done, then you have phase two, which is a humanitarian approach. That
wait, before we get to that, I'll get to that. But so, I mean, so it's your sense, there's no question that some deal has been made between the SDF or YPG, as you prefer to say, between them and the Syrian government, because Syrian troops are already moving into the area. But you are saying that, and yes, again, Turkish President Erdogan did say this morning that Turkey and Turkish-backed forces would be
he basically said that they're getting ready to.
He said this morning that Turkish forces and Turkey-backed forces would be entering Kobani and Manbij, and that they were coordinating with the Russians. So, but you're saying that Turkey may be expecting a battles in Manbij and Kobani against Syrian government troops.
I don't expect any type of battle, because when you look at Turkey's presence in Syria since 2016, since they first launched Operation Euphrates Shield, there's been many areas where Turkish presence has bordered regime presence, and we've never seen the two sides really battle besides mistaken skirmishes here or there. Now, Turkey's not there as an invading force. Turkey's there for counterterrorism operations against whether it be Daesh in Operation Euphrates Shield or the YPG in Operation Olive Branch and Peace Spring. It's also there to shore up the opposition, guarantee their existence, and guarantee them a democratic presence in constitutional committee talks. So I don't think the I don't think Turkish-backed forces will clash with regime forces,
Right, right. So keeping that
especially
in
with
mind,
especially
so
with a Turkish presence.
if there is a
Now,
significant Syrian government troop presence there, and Turkish forces are unlikely to clash with them, this likely means that to some extent Turkey's national security threat, these YPG forces, will linger. I mean, they will not be a force because they will lose their entity, but they will live to potentially fight another day. Does Ankara see this as problematic?
Well, the problem, well, I wouldn't say problematic. I mean, in the end, the YPG's been around for almost a decade and a half in Syria. So, I mean, their presence has always been problematic, obviously, and Turkey would rather see the group dissolved completely. But in the end, that's Syrian domestic affairs. And in the past, we've seen the Adana Agreement from 1998, which in some to some extent quash Turkey's national security concerns. Now, the way I see things unfolding going forward is it's inevitable that there will be a new reiteration of the Adana Agreement put in place in the upcoming year or maybe 2 years' time. Will that be with Assad? Will that be with the regime minus Assad? Will that be with a completely new government that's coming into place? Only time will tell how the political solution process plays out. But it's inevitable because Turkey can't maintain its presence in Syria forever. It's not Turkish soil. It's handing it over to the Syrian opposition, and it will end up inevitably one day completely leaving the country with its troops. So there will need to be some type of agreement that will appease Turkey's national security concerns for the upcoming years after Syria normalizes.
I see. And what do you think is the end game for Turkey in terms of the second objective you mentioned, the refugee resettlement plan, with Syrian forces there now, or likely to be there now? That plan seems to some extent in jeopardy because the Syrian government is supposed to be there to protect the Kurds, which is some of the people that Turkey was hoping to move out to move in the Syrian refugees.
When we see comments coming out of the Kremlin and Putin comments, we've always seen them talk about legitimate security concerns. Now, the Russian president obviously wants this political solution process as quick as possible. They want to shore up the regime. They want Syria to normalize. They've invested a lot of money in Syria. Turkey wants the same things. Turkey wants Syria to normalize. They want to shore up the opposition. They've spent a lot of money. So taking steps towards a political solution is in everybody's interest right now. And I believe that between President Erdogan and President Putin, that the M4 highway is a very acceptable border right now until the political solution process has concluded as a line between the opposition and the regime. Now, many people ask, why was the YPG never invited? Well, you have to look at what the opposition and the regime both want. They both want what the regime obviously wants, control and things to go back to a pre-2011 status. The opposition wants more democracy, but both sides want to protect the territorial integrity of Syria. And the YPG has been the greatest threat to Syria's territorial integrity. While we see Assad rhetoric threatening Turkey and talking about protecting the YPG, in the end, in reality, this Turkish operation has played into the hands of Assad indirectly, breaking the back of probably the group that was the greatest threat to Syria's territorial integrity. So I think that the M4 is a very reasonable border. I think this is something that President Erdogan and Putin probably have discussed in detail behind closed doors. I don't think that anything will be done to breach this imaginary border between the opposition and Assad, because everybody understands that the territorial integrity of the country is in the interest of both of those parties. And I believe that once this border is in place, it will provide the opposition the necessary footing to hold some serious constitutional committee talks with the regime. Because right now, everything's uneven. But with the creation of the Syrian National Army, with the creation of the Constitutional Committee, and now with the opposition controlling a lot more land than it previously had, assuming that the safe zone operation continues in a successful manner.
Right. So what
But we're
about
gonna
that?
see
Though?
them
What
both
about
in,
Turkey's refugee resettlement plan? Is it still
well,
planning to do that?
okay, well, the refugee resettlement plan is all working in context with this bigger picture. To have a political solution process, you need normalization. How can you have normalization when you have 3.6 million of your citizens just in Turkey? I'm not counting the other millions scattered throughout Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and Europe and
I don't
America.
understand the connection. That's the plan was, to create a safe zone space to return these refugees. Whether there's a
Yes.
political solution is a separate issue. Related, sure, but it wasn't part of the plan as mentioned many times.
Okay, you have to think about this all as a puzzle. And the puzzle, the big picture is a new Syria, hopefully a democratic Syria. That's what everyone wants. Will that be realized? I don't know. But the safe zone operation is a big piece of that puzzle. And an even bigger piece is the resettling of these refugees. These people need to come back home. They need to produce for their home countries. They need to feel secure.
So
they
are
need
you
to be
saying
able to go and cast their ballots.
Are you saying that Turkey would not begin returning these refugees unless it was to a united Syria?
Well, first thing, Turkey won't return these refugees to Syria until it's safe for them to return. And second thing, Turkey can't force these people to return. That's why there was a rebuilding project that was sat down and drawn up to create some type of attractive incentive for these people to want to come home. Who wants to come home to rubble? People need something to come home to. These people need to be able to look at what they're coming back to and say, you know what, I could build a life with what they have here. I would rather go back to my country than live abroad in uncertainty. So, I mean, it's a very important part of this political solution process puzzle. And I think that we need to talk about everything interconnectivity now, because we have now reached the state in this conflict where everything is really geared towards this final leg towards a political solution process. I believe Putin understands this very well. I believe Erdogan understands this very well. And I have a strong feeling that the regime and the opposition are slowly coming to this realization as well also.
But just to be clear, so your thinking is that Turkish officials are not planning to move forward with the safe zone refugee resettlement plan unless there is at least significant movement toward a political solution. Is that what you're saying?
I think they're both in line with each other. First thing, they're going to resettle these refugees the second that they feel this area is secure and these refugees would desire a return home. And I think that will trigger and support a political solution process, because you need normalization. You can't have a political solution process with 30% of your population living overseas. It's impossible. There needs to be normalization. And all of these things are in line. I think it's very incorrect to look at everything as an individual piece. These are all parts of an engine right now. And it's very important to look at everything fitting in with each other. And I think that much of Turkey's foreign policy, especially this last year or two, where it started becoming really successful in breaking away from the Davutoglu debacle of the early half of the decade, that it's taking everything in line with each other, where these actions and these foreign policy events are all interlined and intermingled with each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, just to shift a little, speaking of establishing stability, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Turkey-backed rebels executed 9 civilians, including a prominent Kurdish politician, on Saturday after pulling them from their cars, and there's some video of it. I'm just wondering what Turkish officials' view of this is, and is Turkey able to enforce any discipline among its rebel allies?
Look, Turkey, when you look at previous Turkish operations and you compare Turkey's operations to operations from Russia and the United States, you can easily see that the buildings in any Turkey operation, these cities in any Turkey operation, are much more intact than anything that Russia has undertaken, especially when you put pictures of Raqqa and Aleppo next to anything in Operation Euphrates Shield or Afrin. Turkey has been very, very careful regarding human rights. They've been very, very careful regarding civilian life, and they've had the utmost respect for preserving civilian life. Now, I can't comment on something that's not confirmed. I
Well, I mean,
don't know
Human Rights
what
Watch
happened.
and others have
I don't know
reported.
what happened. I do know there isn't. I do know they are investigating, and I mean, we have to wait for the investigation because there's so
Okay, but
much
to
dirty
refer
information and
to what you just
misinformation.
said, in Turkish-controlled Afrin, there have been similar reports and confirmed by Human Rights Watch and Amnesty and
Hmm.
others of violations like
Hmm.
forced disappearances and looting, etc., kidnappings and
Hmm.
ransom.
Look, the Turkish military is a very disciplined military. It's a time-honored institution that has a very deep respect for human rights. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to sit down and talk
Well,
with
I'm aware
Turkish
of this. I'm just
military officials, but I mean, I just like every Turkish citizen most Turkish citizens have done their mandatory service in their Turkish military as part of my civic duty and
sure, but it's more difficult to
citizen duty.
control rebels.
Hmm. I mean, you have many factions of the FSA coming from many different political ideologies and disciplines. I'm sure that anything that is a violation of human rights will be investigated to the utmost. I have no question in my mind that if any violations have been committed, and this is proven, that Turkey will take the necessary steps to punish those who are involved in this.
Okay.
That's without a doubt.
Yeah.
Because you can't establish a peace without holding those accountable for violating human rights, and this is something that Turkey won't stand for at all. Whether it be its own partners, whether it be terrorists on the other side, whoever it is, this is something that will be investigated to the fullest. But like I said, this is something we need to wait for a proper investigation because videos, reports from marginal institutes and whatnot. Marginal media institutions that I don't know of. I don't want to comment on stuff that's not confirmed because I've just seen so many things on social media just get debunked within a minute.
Sure. Speaking of punishment, following the U.S. withdrawal of troops, U.S. announcement of withdrawing his troops, Trump now says he supports sanctions against Turkey and sees a consensus forming around this in Washington. How does President Erdogan and how do Turkish officials view this threat? I mean, the last time U.S. imposed sanctions a year ago over detained U.S. pastor Andrew Brunson, the Turkish lira fell sharply, ultimately pushing Turkey's economy into recession. So what's the thinking now? Does this at all shape Turkey's policy in northeast Syria?
Look, President Erdogan said this before. National security is non-negotiable. And this isn't just stand for Turkey. Every country's national security should be non-negotiable. Who cares about the state of your economy if your citizens do not have security domestically? It's paramount to secure the homeland above all else. Now, will sanctions threats make Turkey change this operation? I highly doubt it. I highly doubt any type of banning of weapon sales from Turkey's European NATO allies will have them change their minds either. Because, like I said, this is the national security issue. This is not a national security issue. So I don't think that sanctions threats will change Turkey's mind. And frankly, I think one of the reasons why this U.S.-Turkey relationship has even gotten to this point was the lack of depth of the U.S.-Turkey relationship. It's been a security-based relationship for half a century. The asymmetric nature of this relationship has caused a lot of trauma, and that security-based relationship now with the U.S. partnering with the YPG has completely had the floor cave in on it. So one of the important points that President Trump made at the G20 was this increasing economic relations, because he understood there that if this relationship does not have depth and it does not have a fallback, anytime security interests diverge, there's going to be problems between the U.S. and Turkey. So policies like increasing commercial trade to 75 billion, policies like bringing a free trade agreement, lifting tariffs in the future. These were very important parts of his message at the G20 at Osaka. I can see, okay, he's supporting sanctions right now, but I think much of this sanctions rhetoric, whether it be Lindsey Graham, whether it be Trump, I think that's for domestic consumption only. I look at the sanctions package that's being written up. It does say stopping the operation in 90 days. Well, Turkey will be done with the military operation in 90 days. So I don't frankly view that as much of a threat. And in the end, even if sanctions were placed on Turkey, I don't think this would stop the Turkish military or the Turkish leadership from conducting this operation.
Okay, so some in the U.S. are saying the U.S. should drop the quote fiction that Turkey is an ally, should pull its nuclear weapons, stop relying on bases within Turkey. But your sense is that Turkish officials aren't kind of believing any of that. They still see the ties as relatively strong, and they shouldn't be too deeply concerned either about this or about sanctions.
Yeah, I am saying that because in the end, everything that you just mentioned is to the detriment of U.S. policy. Why would you pull nuclear weapons from some of the most valuable geopolitical land in the world? The presence of U.S. nuclear weapons there increases U.S. operational capacity tenfold. The presence of Incirlik Air Base gives the U.S. Air Force incredible operational capacity. What the future brings geopolitically, nobody knows. And you have an ally like Turkey, why would you want to lose it?
Okay, just last question. Go back.
Even a better question. If you lost Turkey, who would be your replacement? Who would be your alternative? Iran? Saudi Arabia?
Right.
Can any of these countries provide a capable military like Turkey that can be operationally ready within days and that has the experience of working with NATO troops, that knows the NATO systems, that has the NATO radar systems, the Air Force to back up NATO operations, that has the stability domestically and politically? None. Turkey has no alternative for the United States, and that's why this relationship will continue.
Okay, just last question to follow up on what you previously said. So you think the military element will be over in 90 days or less? What do you think Turkish forces or Turkey wants to achieve in order to end those operations?
Exactly what President Erdogan, the map that President Erdogan showed at the UNGA, 480 kilometers long, 32 kilometers deep, and completely cleansed of any YPG presence. There will probably be certain aspect of guerrilla warfare as the YPG's Turkish brethren, the PKK, conduct in Turkey. So that will obviously be a tolerable level of guerrilla warfare that will continue after those 90 days if this operation is completed in that time. This is all on the presumption that sanctions would be initiated, and these sanctions would go as they are written in print in the Graham Van Gollum sanctions that was printed up in the media. So I'm under that assumption when I'm making this analysis. But yeah,
so that
cleansing
same area.
Yeah, that same area. I don't think Turkey's interested in going further south. There's been talk that Turkey might enter Raqqa or might enter Deir ez-Zor or whatnot, but that's not Turkey's business, and Turkey's not interested in expanding its zone of influence out of what it needs for the opposition and refugees to resettle. And I think right now what it's trying to do is very feasible for the future of Syria. And I think it's something that the Russians, the Iranians, the Americans, when they all sit down, it's an agreeable solution.
Oh, I forgot to ask about what about ISIS detainees? Trump again said yesterday that Turkey needs to keep an eye on them, but I've been hearing that Turkish officials are as yet uncertain about how many of the detainees they will take and who's going to take control, especially now with this deal. What's Turkish official thinking on that?
Well, the Turkish officials have stated that they will take responsibility for every ISIS detainee within the safe zone, and they will work very hard with the home countries of these ISIS detainees to extradite and repatriate these ISIS detainees back to their home country. Now, you have to realize that
many of them are outside the safe zone.
Yeah, I know many of them are outside the safe zone. That's going to be a problem. That's going to depend on how deep this Turkish operation is going to go. In the end, Turkey cannot be responsible for ISIS prisoners outside of its area if this safe zone is going to be expanded, which is a scenario. I mean, one of the things I always play out in my mind is the December 2018 handover proposal that was talked briefly between Erdogan and Trump, where Turkey was going to take control of all of northeast Syria, the whole U.S. coalition territory, but that was quickly canned after Mattis's resignation and McGurk's opposition to that proposal. But that's still a possibility where that scenario can play out, and where the whole ISIS, where the job of containing ISIS, repressing an ISIS revival and continuing the fight against them could be completely outsourced to Turkey as well. But I mean, to comment on that right now, we would have to see how this is going to continue to play out and how deep Turkish forces would enter this area.
Okay, so that's still up in the air. Yeah. Okay, I know you have to go, Yusuf. Thank you so much for your time and your insight.
Thanks for having me, David. Take care.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.